It's a really nice introductory level. I'm going to have you guys start a little bit into it on page, let me move up, page 6, where you can read about what is an all taxa biodiversity inventory. This is a really nice discussion. There is a definition later in another reading, but this is a great place to start. Okay, so once you've read that, you're going to go back up to the beginning and you're going to read about this project. This is a large project. They're going to tell you about how many species they've discovered and some of its importance. That's great. I want you to then keep scrolling. You're going to pay attention to why did they choose this site for such an amazing large project. This is really important. And we're going to read later in the next reading about how you choose a site, so you're going to come back to this once you've read that. You do not need to focus on the cultural history or the collaborative origin, but then pay attention to ancient biodiversity. This is more justification for choosing this site. As you go through, you don't need to skim this even. You can if you want to, just to see more about what they've discovered. It's really a great project, so if you have the time, go right ahead. I do want you to look at this page here, the great discoveries, great stories of discovery. They were discovering more than one new species a week, and they give you some examples of those, so take a look at those. I want to point out their website, which is a great resource. I'm going to ask you to come back to this website to evaluate this project a little bit more. So their website is at dlia.org. They have education here, outreach. They have more about their science and research. So take a look at that. I'll explain in the next reading a little more about why I want you to do that. And then I want to point out that here, NSF funds these every now and then, these large biotic surveys and inventories. So if you take a look at this website at NSF, you don't need to. This tells you a little more about why these surveys are funded. It happens every once in a while. Okay. Now your next chapter that you're reading, or your next article, is chapter 3 of a manual for people doing ATBIs. So this is a great document, a great resource, and I want to explain a little bit about why I'm doing this, why I'm having you read these. Why are you reading about these massive collection efforts? Well, in large part because this is one of the ways that new things come into a museum. These are projects that are of such a large nature that they pose a really big collecting challenge. They also have some of the most well thought out methods, so this will help you as you are evaluating projects or proposing your own projects. Here's the abstract. Always start with the abstract, right? They're going to tell you that there are 4 kinds of challenges, first through fourth. They're setting up the document, so always look at that abstract before you move into your paper. Okay, I'm going to try to go through this quickly here. So starting off in the beginning, they're going to explain how ATBIs are variable, know how they can be variable. Oh, here, the goal, right? I like you to know goals and missions and things like that. Pay attention to that. Why are ATBIs happening? This is interesting. Is it sufficient, the ones that, where are they happening? Is it sufficient, the ones that are happening, to capture Earth's biodiversity? In your own opinion, think about that. They explain some other types of inventories. They mention that monitoring is important. Why is monitoring important? Here they have a list of challenges and solutions, and I think these are wonderful. These are challenges you'll face yourself in other types of projects. So know what the challenges are and those solutions. That's great. Here's why I want you to refer back to the Smoky Mountains example. Go back to that website. They're telling you here the importance of an ATBI. Look and see if these types of importance are reflected in the Smoky Mountains ATBI, Advances in Fundamental Science. Are they doing that with the Smoky Mountains project? How about in applied science? Education, take a look and see if they do have outreach and if that is effective in your opinion. They also give you another link, Smoky Mountains EFT. See if that one or the one that I gave you links to outreach. You'll notice that this justification for these big inventories sound a lot like the justifications for having a natural history museum or collection in the first place. So these will not be foreign to you. Then they talk about implementation and how you choose a site. Here and continued on the next page. So pay attention to that. And when they chose the Smoky Mountain site, do you agree that they chose a good site, given the requirements put up in here? They mentioned that an ATBI is more than a species list. Why is it more than a species list? How is it more than a species list? We're going to get into a little bit of skimming here. They're going to tell you about how to manage your project. Well, you can skim that. They're going to talk about the expense of these. Yeah, it's expensive. You can take a look and see just how expensive and how people leverage lots of different funds to support these. Think about the cost to the museum, right? There's the cost to people to visit the museum to prepare for their project, but what about the museum that houses all these specimens after they've been collected? Now we're going to get into sampling design, and this is where you're going to learn how to evaluate the meaning of a collection that someone might propose to you, or to propose your own collecting effort. They're going to talk about biological challenges and how to overcome those. Here we have a figure. I want you to know what a figure means without the figure legend. So spend the time to get familiar with any figures in a paper that I assign, so that I can give you the figure without the legend and ask you to explain to me what it means. Here's a little vocabulary look and see what a BioBlitz is and how that's different than an ATBI, or maybe involved with an ATBI. In this methodological challenges, this is similar to some of the other challenges in the biological section. Why do inventories only catch a fraction of the species present? You want to be able to answer that question. How do you try to maximize the number of specimens that you are collecting, or species that you are collecting? Here's another figure, the species accumulation curve. So you're going to want to know what that is and how you use it to evaluate your collecting efforts. Okay, then we have a section on taxonomy and how critical taxonomy is, and how much of a challenge it is. So this is explaining one of those 4 challenges. These are great experiences if you can get on one of these trips. Great experiences for students. Note again that they are involving the public. Okay, they're going to talk about preparing. Before you begin your project, how do you prepare for it? This is a good thing to skim. They're going to mention a pilot study. You need to know about that, just that you need to do one. And then here you'll find this interesting, especially coming off of reading the collections controversy. Here is scientists talking to scientists about what are the rules of collecting? How do you minimize your impact? I think you'll find that very interesting. They're going to talk a little bit about central databases. What I want you to get from this is, yes, the data is important. You're going to skim a little bit here. You're going to know that they, in the field, are going to collect information about the event and about the specimens. As a museum, we care about who collected what and when, and often how. We care about who identified things, and we do want the data, right? This is a field collecting data chart, which is different than a museum database. You can really skim here. The only thing I need you to know from this paragraph is that you can use a GPS device to get your locality information. They'll talk about how to standardize your data. What you need to know from here is do a good job, make sure you're using things that will last, and that there are the possibility of optical barcodes for really big efforts. Don't worry about on-site management. We will talk a lot more about permits. Know that you need to have them. And as a museum, you need copies of any of the permits that were used when specimens were collected. Really don't need to know too much about this, except that specimens can be processed in the field and probably should be. But then we get to a conclusion section, and this is a really nice conclusion, so you might want to spend a little time looking at that. Now, this and your next reading have a great section at the end. I really like this. This is stuff we're probably going to use in class. I definitely want you to read through this appendix, focusing on parts that relate to us in the museum: vouchers and taxonomy, metadata, Keep going. Oh, don't worry about what a relational database or a specimen database and event database. Don't worry about that last question there. But do look through these questions here about specimen collection and subsampling. Okay, on to the next one. Now you're going to read about collecting for birds and documenting the collections that you make. So in the abstract here, it says that it's imperative that data associated with specimens that are obtained as complete as possible. Why? They'll give you one answer up here, but they'll explain it and flesh it out here. So make sure you read through that introduction. That some of that reasoning is right in here. How does the amount of data recorded relate to an ATBI? Think about the logistics of collecting and recording. And as you keep reading, think about times when you might want to collect a lot of specimens but not as much data, or when you might want to collect a lot of data and just a few specimens. When is that likely to occur? Then they talk about field notebooks. Some people in these large collecting efforts are going to not be using field notebooks but field databases, electronic databases. Think about where that data ends up, who gets a copy of it. I'll talk about abbreviation and notation. I want you to think about how do you make sure that the abbreviations you're using are understandable to people who come after you. This comes up a lot at the Joseph Moore Museum. You don't need to know all the abbreviations. They have an appendix for you here, but you don't need to know those. We have our own list that you'll become very familiar with. As you start this section here called data, I want you to maybe use the list in Appendix 1 that has all the different data that they want you to collect. I want you to be writing down on there, why are you collecting that data? And I also want you to note any associated specimens besides the individual. Anything you pull off of that individual, it's associated with it, and how you preserve that and why. They're going to mention the difference, but how they think you should number your collections, consecutive from the first thing you collect to the last in your life. It starts at 1 and moves up. If the collector and preparator are different, they will have different names, maybe even different numbers. Then they mention that you want to, under species identification, write the species ID in pencil. Think about why that might be true. And locality, I want you to know the difference between locality and habitat. Habitat will be talked about later. Note that you can use a GPS. Date and time. Know how to write a date and time properly. How do they tell you to write them? Why is it important to record weight and wing length? I really care about the why, not even as much about the what. We get into skim this section on body weight and measurements. Don't worry too much about that. Soft part colors. Why do you want to note colors? Read through that and figure out why. Skull pneumatization. This is calcification. That happens as an individual ages. Don't worry too much about it, but know that they want you to use the percentage, not a larger category. Don't worry about what a colloquial bursa is, but only experts really need to worry about that. We won't worry about it. They talk about fat deposition. Why is it important to note fat? And then they are pointing out here, be explicit about your methods. Make sure that you know that. What are the ways here under sex to determine sex, and how do you note which method you used? What is recorded for females here versus males, and what is recorded for both? Here they talk about stomach and crop contents. Why is it important? Why do you think it's important? Think about comparing over time, why that could be useful, and how you want to store stomach contents. They talk about mold. Just know why you want to write down mold in very, very broad things. Don't worry about details. We also want to note the absence of mold. Specimen treatment. We want to point out that anything that you pull off of a specimen needs to somehow stay related to it. So how do you do that? Then we talk about habitat. Know the difference between habitat and locality. And then parasites. You preserve them in ethanol. And then behavior and ecology. Think about the utility of this information. And we go through and what do you do if there's too much data for one label? What is the minimum amount of data required to record? And please, please don't put things in buffered formalin. Thank you. You should know why based on what John told you.